Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Autry, and this is my presentation on Noam Chomsky and the theory of universal grammar. I hope you enjoy it. Alright, so let's start with the origins of universal grammar. Well, the contemporary concept of universal grammar is relatively new, dating back only to around the 1950s. The actual theory of universal grammar dates back to at least the 13th century. A man named Roger Bacon, who was an English philosopher, first proposed this idea in the late 1200s. And so it's not exactly a new concept. However, Noam Chomsky sort of revitalized this idea and brought it to the mainstream in the late 1950s, which really arose out of his theory of transformational generative grammar. And although Chomsky is probably the most popular linguist who has proposed this theory, he's certainly not the only one. Okay, so now the question is, what exactly is universal grammar? Well, according to Noam Chomsky, who nowadays may be more known for his political beliefs, um, he is, however, a accomplished linguist, uh, and his idea of universal grammar is that it is a system of principles, conditions, and rules that are elements or properties of all human languages, not merely by accident, but by necessity. Okay, so in other words, universal grammar is this theory that all humans are born with certain grammar skills. They're not exactly learned, and we all seem to have them regardless of what we speak. And so this was sort of Noam Chomsky's theory on this. And it seems to suggest that language, or at least the certain skills that it takes to form a language or learn one, seem to be genetic, is what this theory is proposing. All right, so while there are many properties to the theory of universal grammar, there seems to be three main components which it can be broken down into. The first one is that all human language, regardless of region in the world, all seems to share similar properties. Um, the next component of this is that all languages tend to converge on a similar grammar. And finally, the third component would be that children understand grammar in a way that they could not have learned. And this is sort of the genetic aspect to it, that children sort of inherit these grammar skills that help them learn a language. So, as mentioned before in the previous slide, universal grammar seems to be an important aspect for us to understand how language is acquired. Essentially, this theory proposes that children come to understand a language with certain rules and guidelines already sort of in the back of their head, and they seem to unknowingly follow these rules, regardless of where they grew up or what language they are speaking. And these sort of innate rules seem to help children to understand the language in which they are trying to acquire. All right, so with every theory, of course, there's going to be some controversy. And with universal grammar in particular, not every linguist seems to accept Noam Chomsky's theories on this, especially more so recently. Some, such as linguist Daniel Everett, even go so far as to argue that there's really no such thing as universal grammar. And he says that language is a human invention to solve a human problem. So, in a sense, he's saying that we are born uh, not with these special skills, but that over time we sort of just learn the language, and that this isn't something that we are specifically built for, but that we have a problem, which is that we need to communicate with one another, and so this forces us to learn the particular language of those around us. Um, and there are also plenty of other theories on how language is acquired and how this really happens. Some argue that children understand grammar rules just over time and even through, humiliation by, their parents or those around them. This may force them to learn the grammar rules of their particular language that they're trying to acquire. All right, so in closing, universal grammar is really still a growing theory. Noam Chomsky has not ever really stopped working on this, and he's certainly altered things over time, made small corrections, and added to his theory. And it's still growing. And it's really hard to tie down exactly what universal grammar means because of that, because of him and the other linguists who have worked on this theory, that you sort of have to tie it down to some of the components I talked about in this presentation. And of course, some definitely still disagree with Chomsky's findings and with his theory in general. Um, some argue that it's never been demonstrated to be true, that there's no verifiable evidence to suggest that we do have a sort of universal grammar, and that languages are different in general, and sometimes they provide examples of how this is true. But overall, I think that universal grammar, while obviously it's not perfect, or else it wouldn't be questioned, um, it provides a pretty good explanation as to how language is acquired among children. And it seems to show that there is something about language that we are born with, whatever that may be, I don't know. But we seem to have a need to want to speak to one another, and we seem to do it in a similar fashion. And so I think that the theory of universal grammar is certainly still relevant to this day. Thank you for watching this presentation. And if there's anything I should have included that you know about, please feel free to let me know. Um, I'm open to any kind of comments on that. Thank you.